Welcome to our last part of our four-part series, Meditation 101, Myth Busting. And tonight's topic is about realization. And if you have not had a chance to see the previous sessions, we are slowly building up, but they are, of course, also standalone. And so, as mentioned, that this word meditation being used specifically for Raja Yoga. And so this is where we are addressing what is this aspect of meditation in terms of what Raja Yoga is about. Raja Yoga is really about re-emerging, reawakening this real sense of who I am, a spiritual being. And the intention is, which is tonight's topic, is to the level of realization. Realization at the level where my day-to-day responses, my day-to-day priorities, my way of how I see things, how I respond. And if one's aim is really clear, that even their dreams would change. In terms of my sense of identity as a spiritual being inside this body, but a spiritual being who is eternal, who is imperishable, whose value is not defined by that which is physical, by temporary things. And so, because the aim of Raj Yoga is to come to that sense of reality again of who I am, and that in this study you remember that this was your true sense of identity. You used to have that experience while you were actually in a body, while you were walking and moving around, while you were playing your parts. But through time, you've forgotten. And so, because that is this memory inside, we are reawakening in this day-to-day experience that I used to have, very integrated, very natural. Then again, it increasingly helps us to understand that, at least particularly in this study, why closing your eyes, shutting the world out, suppressing thoughts, thinking that's not necessarily relevant to day-to-day life, is actually not really part of what the study is about. And so we have moved from open eye in terms of what's going on inside at every moment, to that I'm actually transforming my thinking, and to the level where what I'm thinking about is very meaningful at the level of these eternal truths that I'm actually reflecting on. And the intention of these eternal truths that I'm holding inside in my awareness, that it will be something that I start to recognize. I start to become familiar again with what this memory of who I am is. And so it is about this recognition that can move into realization. We can recognize something is good, but still not have the power to do anything about it. Recognize something as being important, but still there can be much more steps forward in terms of what can happen with that recognition. And there's this simple example. I remember I was working at this hospital unit, and it just so happened I was actually working with my sister. And there was a new staff member that was there. And when my sister and her saw each other, they recognized each other. They're like, I know you from somewhere. They both said that, but I don't know where I know you from. And they never figured it out. Right. So there was recognition, but they couldn't go any further with that. And so we can recognize that there are certain things that are very good for us, certain things that are not good for us. But the ability to do something about it, to act on that recognition, to go further in that recognition in terms of what does that recognition mean? How is it significant to me? That can apply to day-to-day life, but also in terms of my sense of self. So these eternal truths, we recognize that peace is a very, very important quality, that to be able to be full and not affected through the day, to have self-respect, self-worth, that these are very important qualities. We recognize that. But to the degree in which I can actually have an authority over these experiences, to actually choose to do something, to access these experiences, choosing them over, perhaps old ways of how I feel and operate and think, maybe even choices through my day to be able to allow myself to have that kind of time. That is where we're starting to move into this aspect of realization. So if we want to, again, to use that word meditation, we're really talking about really having to really take care of how I'm thinking. And that's what we use the word meditation, is really I'm just learning to be able to think properly, think in a way that is actually useful for me. Think in a way that actually helps to honor and channel the way I'm seeing things, that is going to help me to foster this recognition that I am a soul, that I'm a spiritual being, that I'm not defined by the physical, by roles, by expectations, by what others think, or even what I think of myself, which may not actually even be accurate. And to be able to then hold these specific eternal truths in a way that allows me to go deeper, to experience them and to actually embody them. And so it's a beautiful journey, this four-part series, to start to understand. Even I have learned a lot just being able to share as well, that even in the study, we also acknowledge, as we have mentioned in some of the previous sessions, that we have taken rebirth. And so we have been wanting peace for a very long time. And we've been wanting freedom, wanting value, a feeling of belongingness, meaningfulness, but that we have been doing some endeavors in our previous births that may not have actually been allowing us to be able to really access that experience of who we are. And that it has perhaps maybe even left a mark, an impact inside, that makes meditation actually quite a scary endeavor to go on. And I remember when I had facilitated some sessions at the workplace, and there was one soul, and this was actually quite common. There was a soul who said that every time she just tries to meditate, and meditate, I didn't even use that word. It was like, okay, let's guide you through some reflective thoughts. And she said it was really hard for her. Maybe I did use that word meditation, but what it was triggering inside was, some deep habits of, that she would start to check out. She would really didn't realize that she was trying to force thoughts from coming from mind. She was just really trying to go inside, but she was starting to lose herself as well. And she said she would always struggle to try to stay awake. And that's completely understandable. Even I had gone through that in the beginning. as well. And so there are these habits, and actually in this journey, that these habits that we have accumulated through previous births, and that's just one, that there can actually be change. So this aspect of realization is quite interesting. This word realize, real eyes, for me, my eyes to see which that is real again. And so just a very, very brief summary in terms of the anatomy of me, the soul. We've talked about and explored about the mind, that I, the soul, have the capacity to think. That even though when we're not aware we're souls, we're always thinking. It's just the quality of thinking, as we mentioned in part one, is what is the source of sorrow. That what we think about, and we can hardly even have power about what we think about, that really creates so much misunderstanding about ourselves and others. And many want to meditate, they seek to meditate because they feel that what it is about is just to actually stop my thinking, because my thinking is creating so much sorrow. But the mind actually is informed by a third capacity we haven't really talked about. We talked about the intellect in one of the earlier sessions, but this third capacity is actually something very subconscious. Maybe we mentioned a little bit about it, but it's called sanskars. And it's just basically these habits that I have within me. When I am myself and I haven't lost myself as a soul, and my natural nature of purity, peace, love, power, bliss, truth, and harmony, when they're all there very naturally, these are my true habits. We call them sanskars. These are my true impressions of who I am. And that's all subconscious. And they basically inform what kind of thoughts that I have. So when we were ourselves, truly in that pure state of being a soul, completely healthy and full, operating in the body, our sanskars are of these 7 qualities, and very naturally then they inform, they drive my thinking. So my thinking to begin with was completely healthy. My thinking was all based on these 7 qualities, these 7 original qualities of me, the soul. But through time, when we forget ourselves, we start to, and that's where the intellect comes in play. My second capacity, this is the capacity to discern, to remember, to decide. So I start to forget who I am, because we've become so familiar being in the physical. You're not reminded, you don't have to remind yourself that you're a soul when you're actually in that reality of who you are. And so you don't need to, you're not seeking for truth, because you're already in the embodiment of that. And you're not seeking for happiness and peace when you're already the embodiment of that. But through time, you start to lose who you really are. And so this is where the intellect is involved, that I, the soul, I have an intellect. I had that capacity to remember, but I start to forget at that time. And when I start to forget, then I start to make choices. I start to live life based on a different perception of myself, not a very clear, true perception of myself. That I start to identify more and more physicality, more and more with everything out there, everything that's tangible. And what happens then, that whenever I make decisions, I interact or I act based on that understanding that isn't real, it reinforces this impression of myself that I am physical. And so my true quality, my true 7 qualities of my natural nature start to change, in the sense that I increasingly am not able to access those experiences of those 7 qualities. And so what happens is then that because I start to have a different idea of what is true value, there is then attachment to this body and to physical things as my sense of identity. And if I'm not filling up with what is truly going to help me come back to myself again, I'm going to increasingly become empty. And that is where desires emerge. Totally understand when word greed emerges as well. And then I need to really have a sense of value. We can't actually live without that. And we don't realize that we live for value, to feel like there's progress, to feel like we are validated, to feel that we belong, we are connected, that I'm able to contribute, I'm able to have newness, insight, meaningfulness. This is all value. We're not just talking about physical things, the original sense of self. We lived that, experienced that, but even though we're not aware that we are souls, we are looking for all of that. We can't live without that for even a second. It makes life meaningless in that sense. And so because of that, then we start to live in a sense of a false identity for that value. So that's what develops as ego. And anger is very much expected. If you can't get what is going to be fulfilling, it's frustrating. And that's where anger emerges. So these 5 vices then become this acquired impression of yourself, these acquired sense scars. And then these sense scars, again, drive the way you think. And the only way things will actually change is that it can't just be at the level of thought. Because my sense scars, I can't access my original, true, deepest impression of who I am, which is very subconscious. And so meditation is really supporting to be able to have different kinds of thoughts, to expose the capacity of me to remember, the capacity of me to discern what is true, what is not, expose myself to those true, eternal thoughts of myself, to be able to access the experience of them. And when I start to feel them, this is what it means to touch the intellect, that my third eye opens. That's where that phrase comes from. Be able to see again. And what happens is when I start to perform actions based on this awakened understanding of myself, I start to reemerge true qualities of who I am. But also, this word meditation, these thoughts then allow me to have the concentration to again focus on these thoughts, not as a mantra, but really exploration, significance, the experience. Because when you start to remember who you are, thinking about the truth of who you are, it brings this stillness inside. Because you are remembering who you are, it touches you to become free. Oh, this is what I'm like. This is who I am. And that stillness is not suppression. It's because there's just no noise of confusion, no noise of worry, no noise of temporary and fluctuating. That when you start to remember and feel who you really are, based on these eternal truths, the noise of the temporary, it really does fade away because you're accessing what is eternal. You're feeling it. And so then you start to have that experience of yourself as a soul. And that's where we move off into realization, because you're feeling it. You're really exploring the significance of these eternal truths. But also then being able to have that stillness, that silence, to be able to have a beautiful healing connection with our spiritual parent, what we call yoga. Yoga refers to that connection with our spiritual parent. It's a very gentle, still resonance, this feeling in silence within, but also that connection with myself as well. So we call this topic this evening imagination versus realization, because we can sometimes think of spirituality is oftentimes irrelevant, and maybe that's not the case with those who are already practicing spirituality. But meditation has developed through time, um, some interesting um, connotations, so to speak. And so we have had souls ask this question too, what am I doing in this reflection? Am I imagining myself as a point of light? Am I visualizing myself as a point of light? And this one soul who had asked that question was very perceptive, because he said, but that doesn't feel like I'm actually going into reality. I mean, I can picture myself as a point of light floating in the sky, floating in this body, but like I don't feel real. I don't feel it's me. And so it became a beautiful conversation about, this is all about really like having to start to ask yourself those questions. And there's a deep longing inside to realize who I really am. And there's a deep longing when the timing is right, that I'm tired of all these other sense of identities I have been using, and yet they have not been very meaningful at all, and they have not been fulfilling. And so it is a journey, and the intent was to close that gap in terms of what is meditation for, if we want to use that word. We don't use that word too much in the study. Sometimes we use it, but I know that it can be sort of taken back to these old ideas, which is the intention of this 4-part session, was that ultimately, perhaps maybe a better way to use it is just that I am learning to think again. But the thinking that I'm having is for the intention, so that the thoughts that I'm having are based on truth, so that they'll go deeper at the level of recognition and start to inform what is my awareness of myself. And that kind of awareness of myself that I go through the day, decisions, interactions, based on this awareness of myself, based on truth. And start to really actually experience who I really am. And even through the day, one starts to feel that it's not really the actions that matter, it's what's going on inside. What is my experience of myself in these actions and interactions? So you start to feel, you can use this word, introspective and introversion. So introspection and introversion. And both of them are actually a part of, if you want to use the word meditation, is that I'm learning to stay inside, to watch my inner world, watch my responses, my impressions, how I'm thinking. But also with the intention that I'm using the lens of truth to be able to see what's going on in my inner world. And even when it comes to reactivity that's going on inside, to be able to use the lens of understanding based on Raja Yoga, to be able to see myself with understanding, have different responses. So that is really what meditation is, particularly specifically in this study. So for those who are watching, you may definitely enjoy what you have learned from meditation from other types of studies. And we really encourage you to just explore what is meaningful for you, and just really, just honor what matters to you. But this was a very lovely opportunity for those who do grapple with what meditation is with respect to this study. And so we're just going to have a brief reflection. Comes a point in one's life. It could be a crisis. It could be a low point, maybe not just in one's life. It could be a low point in the day or a low point in a week. But usually at that time, one starts to also go into some reflection inside. Mainly because during those low points, there's also an increasing disinterest because of being tired, a disinterest in doing the things that may not be fulfilling, a disinterest in doing things in a routine way, maybe even a disinterest in seeing certain individuals engaging in certain things in life that don't seem to help one discover their purpose or foster their purpose. That's where it comes to a point where one starts to reflect about this question that is perhaps the most common question in life is, who am I? And to reflect for myself, one can call it meditation. Am I just this body? The gender, the age, or even the striving to find a gender, to fit in the age group, fit in a certain culture, fit at any particular social setting. Am I really defined by what others see of me? Especially how I feel that I am being treated. I feel that there is much more to me. I feel that I could actually be open to considering that I am a soul. But a soul who has gone through a journey, a soul whose original eternal self was light, was free, was pure in that true state of self. But through time, that I, the soul, lost myself, acquired a different personality, lost that happiness, that joy, that spark. Would I be open to considering that I am a soul? Acknowledging that there is a true nature of who I am, but also acknowledging that I have a story that I went through. That these two elements can really help me to heal or to know the real me, to help me to really genuinely understand myself. Be open to that sense of who I truly am. Being of consciousness. To explore that. To take time to let my heart resonate with that. Not by force, not by imagination or visualization, but constantly weighing, even through the day, weighing what is real of who I am and what is not. And taking one gentle step at a time to allow that reflection, see what touches the heart. Help me see again. Not the eyes, the physical eyes, but the eye of understanding. Thank you for joining with us this evening. So that concludes our 4-part series of Meditation 101. And so you're welcome to join us for meditation. We call it meditation experience. And there's the opportunity to experience what it means to be a soul. And those are offered on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays at 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And we also have World Meditation Hour, which is the third Sunday of the month, but those are very lovely as well. And just because there tends to be more of a collective connection at that time. So you're welcome to reach out to the center if you ever have any questions about Raj Yoga. So thank you again for joining.